Hey, everybody. Happy Monday and welcome back to the stream. I'm sure if you guys are listening right now, you can tell my voice sounds so much better compared to last week. It is still a little bit scratchy and we're still a little bit on the mend. But last week I was hit with the worst cold I've had in a very, very long time. Some other people that were working at the event that I spoke at on Tuesday also got pretty sick last week. So I think it was just something going around. I spoke at a K through 12 school, so kindergarten through 12th grade high school, last Tuesday in Texas, in Marble Falls, Texas. And I'm not really surprised that we all wound up sick because it's cold and flu season in schools all over the country. So I am so profusely sorry that we didn't end up streaming the second half of the week last week. I was pretty much on my deathbed. It was not very fun and my voice was completely shot. And if you are in the world of work that I am in, obviously your voice matters a whole heck of a lot. So we were able to preserve my voice as best as we could and we are back. I've got one cup of tea in front of me. I'm sure I'm going to ask my fiance to bring me another one before the stream is out today. But we're back. It's Monday. It's a beautiful day. It's a very exciting week on my end. Lots of stuff to share with you guys here at the end of the stream about some guests that we have coming up this week and some more fun announcements. But mostly I'm just great and happy to be back with all of you guys because the time I get to spend with you every day is the highlight of my day. We are live this Monday afternoon on YouTube, on Rumble, on Facebook, on Getter, and of course with our locals community. And I'm so grateful to see each and every one of you use our live chat and say hello to us, which I'm going to invite everybody to do. We have a great big week in front of us. And because we didn't stream for the last couple of days, we have a couple of different topics that I want us to break down on the stream today. One, we are going to dedicate the vast majority of our time to, but I think today's going to be a little bit of a longer stream. So I hope you guys can stay with us all the way through the end. If not, come in, come out whenever you need to. You guys know the drill. We are truly live around here, very authentic and unscripted, and mostly just love to spend time with each other every single day. Let's say hi to some people in the chat to kick things off. Total Package, Dutch Canadian, and Obadiah are up first in our YouTube chat. Mighty Sarlacc and Rick are tuning in. Jake saying hello from down under in Australia. Jordan France is here. We've got Nintendo fan Brenda and more. You guys are the best. Over on Rumble, John Best, Sarah, Tuco are all watching. Craven is here. My Quillwin is here. TZ Patriot and 56 others. I'm so glad that you guys are here and kicking off our stream with a force today. Nitty Witty is kicking things off for us in our Getter chat. And over on Locals, we have some pretty great viewership. We love seeing that community continue to grow. You guys are all invited to join Locals. We have some exclusive content that only exists over there every week. We post some extra interviews with people that only exist over there. And we're working on doing an in real life IRL meetup with our Locals community very, very soon. So would love to see you guys all be a part of that. Emrock, Becca, Sabina, Johnny, Alex, Magic Def, Mountain Lover, and more. You guys are the absolute best. So glad that you are here. And I just want to tell you right now, buckle the freak up for everything we are about to talk about today. I wish I was making everything up, especially about our second story we're going to dive into. I'm not. I wish I was. It's a very weird time to be alive. Every day I ask myself, like, is it time to leave this planet? Probably, more and more with every passing day. And today will make you feel the same way. But it's important that we talk about this stuff, that we drag this darkness out into the light and try to defeat lies with the truth. As we're jumping into our first of 3 stories today, do me a huge favor, you guys. And if you haven't already hit the like button on this stream, please do so. That might look like a little thumbs up button or a little heart button. It helps get us picked up in the algorithm and gets some great live viewership so that other people can join this important conversation. And most importantly, smash that follow or subscribe button to make sure that you are following or subscribed to this channel. These streams will always be free. They are totally free, but I am a completely independent content creator. I do this out of the spare bedroom of my apartment with a very, very low budget. And every single time you guys hit subscribe or follow, it helps to grow our community and continue making these streams and other pieces of content possible. Okay, let's kick things off for just a couple of minutes and talk about this trending story that's going really, really viral on Twitter and TikTok. I'm seeing countless posts about this on those 2 platforms in particular, mostly over on TikTok. But I've never heard women of any generation, but particularly my generation, come up with just the most ridiculous, unrealistic expectations of what a first date is supposed to look like until this last week. And I look around at dating culture in our society, and particularly for Generation Z, and I see so many people that are not dating, so many people that are really miserable in their dating lives, and so many people who just have lost hope, frankly, for getting married themselves, for what the future of dating is going to look like in our society. And then I see posts like these, and I'm like, gee, I wonder why you're still single. I wonder why you're not planning your wedding. I wonder why you think that all men are trash, because we put these expectations on first dates that are completely unrealistic and, frankly, if I'm just going to be colorful with you, stupid, and setting you up for the most ridiculous level of expectation for what you think a good first date is actually going to look like. So all of these girls are going incredibly viral, posting lists, one list in particular that is blowing up on TikTok about unacceptable places to go on a first date, places that a girl would just absolutely refuse to be taken on a first date. And it's sort of like a litmus test whether or not she likes the guy enough to actually go out with him and actually be his girlfriend. And there were like 20,000 videos that I could show you about this, so I decided to just pull up the list itself because it's just ridiculous to me. Most of the people commenting on my video on Instagram about this earlier today all hit every single part of this list. They said that their first date was all at these forbidden, unacceptable, unreasonable places, and they're married for decades and decades and decades. I'll tell you about my first date here in a second with my now fiance, but just let me know, chat, if this is truly unacceptable or if these girls just have the most ridiculous expectations for what a good first date is supposed to look like. Like I said, it was a bunch of girls that came together on TikTok to create this list of unacceptable places to take a woman on a first date. It started over on Twitter, who ended up curating the list. We don't really know, but a bunch of people reached out together to create this conglomeration of a list, and now it's going super viral on TikTok. Many of the places listed are popular chain restaurants, and we'll go through the full list here in a second. And all of the places that were tagged or mentioned ended up sharing this or commenting on it sort of as a joke. I am baffled, bamboozled. I am just so stumped as to where these expectations came from that all 28 of the things listed here are unacceptable for a litmus test of a guy who really cares about you. Number one, overwhelmingly, resoundingly, was the Cheesecake Factory as an unacceptable place to be taken on a first date. The Cheesecake Factory. Now, I'll be the first to admit I didn't grow up with a lot of cheesecake factories near or around my house. That just was never something that was like readily available to me. But the few times that I've been to a cheesecake factory, I've always had a good experience. Their menu is like 20,000 pages long. So especially on a first date where you're not really sure what type of food a girl likes, I feel like it's a pretty safe bet. It's really yummy. Like, it's good. I've never eaten bad food at the Cheesecake Factory, but that was the number one place women from across the internet of my generation have said, yeah, that's an unreasonable, unacceptable place for us to go on our first date. I will think less of you if you take me to the Cheesecake Factory, but it gets better. No Applebee's, which I do kind of understand because Applebee's, I believe, is the D-list, like second tier Chili's. But I'm sorry, if you come for Chili's, you come for me. I used to go to Chili's with my family every Sunday night. Chili's is no worse for you than anything else, okay? Everybody who likes to pretend that they are above Chili's, they are lying to you. They would eat the skillet queso in one fell swoop if they had the opportunity to. And don't you ever try to tell me that Chili's Big Mouth Bites, Chili's Fajitas, Chili's Margaritas, and Chili's Strawberry Lemonade is beneath you, because you are lying to yourself and to the world by doing so. You can't go to Chipotle, Olive Garden, or any other fast food chain for your first date. You can't go to someone else's house, but the movies? Now you can't go to the movies on a first date. I can understand why people might say that, because you don't have the opportunity to talk to somebody, but that's kind of why the movies are great, because you can go for a drink or go out to dinner and then go to the movies, and there's no pressure to talk to somebody for 3.5 hours, but like you get to do something fun together, and then you have something to talk about after or before. That's like an easy, great first date. I've had many first dates at the movies with other people, and they've been great. Buffalo Wild Wings, I can kind of understand for women that, like, you don't really necessarily want a bunch of sports blaring in the background. And Brett Cooper said the same thing in her analysis of this. She always nails it every time. I can kind of understand Buffalo Wild Wings and Wingstop, but Red Lobster, you are telling me that you would think less of a man if he bought you the Red Lobster Ultimate Feast and the bottomless, cheesy bread rolls. You're telling me you would think less of a man for doing that for you. You are lying to yourself. You are lying to this country. You are lying to this generation. You are lying to the world if you would not want to go on a first date with a man to Red Lobster. People have to beg their significant others to take them to Red Lobster. People with real class and a real taste. Okay? A buffet, I can kind of understand, I suppose. But IHOP and Denny's? What is wrong with breakfast food? Breakfast foods are not first date material? What would Leslie Knope say? She would say, why would anyone eat anything other than breakfast food? And Ron Swanson would reply, people are idiots, Leslie. And you are an idiot if you would not go get breakfast food with a man because he has immaculate taste and will probably treat you like the freaking queen that you are. The gym, I can get behind. Although, like, doing something active on a first date, like playing pickleball or like something like that would be really fun. Playing basketball, that would be super fun. I don't see anything wrong with that. Church, I don't know. For a lot of people, kind of the ideal first date scenario. If you start it with God, it's probably going to do pretty okay. But Starbucks and coffee. What is wrong with these people? What is wrong with these women? When did a coffee date become an unacceptable place to meet a man? To feel something out for like 30 minutes before you go on a full date, before you commit to hours and hours and hours with somebody and actually have to carry a longer conversation with them. When did coffee dates become trashy? Am I missing something? And it doesn't just stop at coffee. Ice cream. Ice cream dates are on the list as well. Who are we? Family functions, movie night, anywhere that requires a long drive, bowling? I love bowling. I took an entire semester of bowling in high school for my PE elective. I think that was junior year. I have my own bowling shoes. I love bowling. I am having my rehearsal dinner at a bowling alley for my wedding. Like, I love bowling. If you are too good for bowling, expect to be single for the rest of your life. I'm just telling you that right now as somebody planning her wedding. If you think you are too good for bowling on a first date, you will never find a man. Particularly a man who loves fun and wants to treat you right and take you to go have fun experiences where you actually do something and you don't just sit there like a log. Justice for bowling. Nightclubs, I understand. And a hookah bar, I'm totally behind. I'm not really into any of that culture. But you can't even go out for just drinks. No just drinks. No bar for just drinks. You need a full meal, but not at any of the restaurants on this list, presumably. Waffle House follows suit with IHOP and Denny's. And sporting events. No sporting events for you because all girls hate sports. All girls have literally no taste, essentially, is what this list is telling you. Look, where that leaves any opportunity to have a place to go, because they don't provide any solutions for a first date alternative when they make this list of unacceptable places to go on a first date, I don't know. What's left that's not on the list? A bunch of people said mini golf on my Instagram. Mini golf is elite, but I'm pretty sure a girl who's too good for bowling is definitely too good for mini golf. Apparently, a girl who's too good for the movies is probably too good for mini golf, apparently. But like, where do you even go on a date? Do you expect somebody to just shell out $500 for a 5-star restaurant for you on the first date? Probably not. And by the way, that's awfully pretentious. My best advice for you is this. Before I ever went on a formal first date with my now fiance, and for the record, we went and got sushi at not like a 5-star restaurant, and then we went to a comedy club and we watched his favorite comedian just for drinks. Which probably, it wasn't expressly on the list, but probably would fall into the trashy category for many of these girls. Before I ever went on a formal first dinner date with my fiance, when I met him, we were at a work conference, and we had to work together for like 5 days in a town that we didn't live in. And literally, I kid you not, we spent probably 4 days in a row just staying up all night talking, getting ice cream and coffee, like not actually sitting down for a dinner or like a formal experience, and just being able to spend time together in our sweatpants, drinking coffee and eating ice cream and talking about the biggest things in life and the littlest things in life. Just being in each other's presence and being in each other's company was the most special way for us to fall in love in a really authentic and beautiful way. Like, there was no pretension. There was no pretending to be somebody that you weren't. It was just this beautiful budding of best friendship that turned into an incredibly amazing romantic dating relationship. And now we are getting married. And the number of stories that I hear from people who have been married for decades and decades and decades that are like, we had the most unsuspecting first date of all time. It wasn't this super intense pressure, pretentious thing. We just got to be authentically ourselves around them. The more pressure you put on a first date to be perfect or like meet all of your expectations, the less likely, in my opinion, your relationship is going to work out over the long run. Because if you're looking for somebody who's going to be your husband, or if you're looking for somebody who's going to be your wife, you want to find the person that you are 150% totally okay and comfortable with being yourself around. The goofiest, weirdest, most authentic version of yourself that nobody else gets to see, like even your immediate family doesn't get to see. And they bring that out in you even further, where there's no pressure, there's no pretension, there's no high expectations. It's just fun all the time, and you love spending time with each other all the freaking time. If you don't have that feeling from the get-go, they probably aren't the one, at least in my experience. And I hate seeing so many women simultaneously make this unrealistic expectation that you have to like be flown to Paris on a private jet and eat a 5-star meal in designer heels in order to have a great start to your relationship. But then they also turn around and say, where are all the men? Why aren't the men dating? Why aren't the men interested in pursuing me? Let yourself be pursued is all I'm going to say to that. I don't know what you guys think about all of that, but that story was just absolutely wild to me. How truly insane some of these expectations actually are blows my mind. And just for the record, sports games, great way to have a first date. The movies, great way to have a first date. Getting drinks or coffee or ice cream, great way to have a first date. If you ever come for me over Red Lobster and Chili's ever again, you cannot be my friend. I'm just setting that expectation out now. That I feel is a completely realistic expectation. But stop pretending like you're too good for Red Lobster and Chili's. You're not. You're just lying to yourself. And speaking of lying to yourself, here's the meat and potatoes of everything that we really wanted to talk about today. The American Academy of Pediatrics is lying to themselves and to the rest of the world. They hosted an annual conference that they normally put on every single year last week in Washington, D.C. It was the American Academy of Pediatrics National Conference and Exhibition. So this is like an annual thing where a bunch of board certified pediatricians from all over the world come together and they talk about new challenges in pediatric, that's children's medicine, where they can improve clinical medicine. People do like journal presentations and research presentations, lots of networking, blah, 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 blah. Basically getting all of a bunch of doctors in the same room together and trying to make medicine better. Or so we thought. Last week in Washington, D.C., the annual national conference for the American Academy of Pediatrics involved a presentation from one particular Dr. Ilana Schrerer. I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but she is a board-certified pediatrician from, shockingly, California in Palo Alto, who gave a presentation about creating a more gender-inclusive nature of pediatric medicine and where doctors can go out of their way to make children's medicine, when you bring your child, your little boy or girl to the pediatrician, how we can make that more gender inclusive, not just in how we approach clinical terminology and names in a clinical setting, but in actual treatment of children as well. There is a lot to unpack here, and I pulled the actual slides from Dr. Schrerer's presentation at this particular conference, so we'll blow it up bigger here in just a second, but I saw this originally through the Daily Mail that reported on this on October 24th, so if you guys are looking for more information, that's a great resource for you to check out. They reported that a prominent doctor at the American Academy of Pediatrics proposed renaming penises, vaginas, and clitorises into something new to create a more gender inclusive pediatric medical setting all over the country. She's a pediatrician from California who provides transgender care. Shocking. Color me shocked. And she was tasked with giving a presentation at this conference last week. We're going to come back to all of these slides here in just a second. This is Dr. Schrerer. Should I even say she? Do I even know this? They call her she, her, but can we really even assume is all I'm going to say. Is a general pediatrician at Palo Alto Medical Foundation or Sutter Health in Dublin, California, provides pediatric transgender care. This is something that she's very, very boastful about and prideful about, no pun intended. But she says that she wasn't speaking on behalf of the American Academy of Pediatrics, just giving a presentation there. But of course, the American Academy of Pediatrics allowed her to give this presentation. And although they haven't specifically commented on the contents of the presentation, it's something that is now blowing up and going super viral all over the internet. For all of the right reasons for doing so. And let me just say, if you are a parent especially, you need to be aware of what is happening through the AAP and other medical settings, by the way, in the insane woke takeover of clinical medicine in America. This is an exceptionally intentional effort by people who have taken the Hippocratic oath to do no harm, allegedly, to try to twist and manipulate objective truth and health care to manipulate you and your children. And the fact that this is happening in pediatric medical settings, let alone any adult medical clinical setting, is enough to make my blood boil. And it should for you, especially if you are a parent. I'm not even a parent, so like the level of angry I am over this probably has nothing in comparison to what you guys are feeling. But this is probably being communicated in some way, shape, or form to your child's pediatrician, whether they are a member of the American Academy of Pediatrics or not. And as you navigate the right healthcare for you and your children, it's incredibly important that you are educated and aware of how they are approaching these issues, and maybe even how they might be approaching these issues when you are not present, when it is just involving your child. So without further ado, here were some of the suggestions by Dr. Schrerer, general pediatrician who gave this presentation at last week's AAP conference, for how to make gender neutral pediatric medicine, I can't even say all of these things because there's so many specific terms, possible in America moving forward. We're going to come back to this slide. We're going to start with this bad boy. First and foremost, and most importantly, calling for pediatricians to rename feminine or masculine genitalia, your body parts, which in and of themselves are already pretty inclusive terms. They are clinical medical terms. In college, when I took human gross anatomy with actual cadavers and learned about the intricacies of human gross anatomy, we learned the specific clinical medical terms for things like a vagina or a penis or testicles or a clitoris. And I'm saying these from a clinical medical perspective. They are not bad words. They are the actual names of these structures for a reason. And they have that name in a clinical medical setting where someone needs to provide healthcare to you for a reason. But apparently, calling a vagina or calling a penis is so far beyond the pale and is so exclusive of people who feel confused about their gender, especially kids, that the suggestion now from Dr. Schrerer is to rename women's body parts and men's body parts to be even more neutral than the clinical medical terms that they already have, including changing vagina and penis to innie and outie, which previously only ever referred to our belly buttons, I thought, but no, not anymore. A vagina is presumably now a front hole instead of a back hole. We've also heard bonus hole thrown around by a few pediatricians and other doctors who've gone pretty viral on social media for suggesting bonus hole instead of the word vagina. I'm literally not making this up. You can see it on the screen yourself. This is from Dr. Schrerer's slides in her presentation last week at this conference. It feels like a South Park episode for me to be telling you this, but the clinical medical name of the clitoris is now being suggested by this pediatrician to become dick or dicklet. I can't even laugh. Like, it's just that absurd. Yeah, you read that right. Where are the feminists on that one? Changing a female structure to dick or dicklet, or the T penis. I don't even know what that's supposed to mean. I'm not even going to try to take a gander. And of course, breasts can't exist anymore either, even though men and women have breasts technically, and men and women can be diagnosed with breast cancer. No. Breast is way too gender exclusive. So now breasts are going to be chesticles, which literally feels like a joke out of like Ferris Bueller's Day Off or other 1980s era comedy movies. Like how this was an actual suggestion by a pediatrician at the American Academy of Pediatrics. I can't. But we can't just rename women's body parts. We also have to rename men's body parts. So the opposite of an innie is a what? An outie. Not your belly button, kids. Not anymore. Or your junk. Very, very esteemed clinical explanatory word to describe what's going on down there for men. I feel so specifically aware of what you are talking about, doctor, when you say the word junk. Very explanatory. Thank you for that. Strapless. Why strapless? I don't know. Maybe because it's the opposite of a strap on. I can't even begin to try to wrap my brain around that. Or bits. Like junk. So very explanatory of everything that's going on. And of course, these suggestions were not made as a joke. They were not made to be funny. They were not made as a meme. This was given during a workshop that Dr. Schrerer hosted called Discussing Gender and Sexuality in the Primary Care Office, and in particular recommended changing all of these words specifically as a means to create gender neutral body terminology. And there have been many others in the medical community pushing for this type of radical language overhaul and radical terminology overhaul because they believe it's going to create a more inclusive space for people who might not identify as one gender or one sex or their particular gender or sex, and that they're not comfortable using gender-specific terminology. But what's really, really scary is how much this impacts health messaging and public health messaging, how much it impacts people's and communities' availability to actual health care because you can't accurately describe what's going on in your body. Ultimately, you guys know how I feel about transgender medicine, particularly as it pertains to children, pediatric transgender medicine. But let's just say, even if you are somebody experiencing gender dysphoria, and even if I were to wake up tomorrow and think I am now a man, how come we say men who menstruate and birthing men or birthing people, isn't it totally possible to say that this man has a vagina? Why is the word vagina all of a sudden female or male when it's describing a structure? Because gender is a spectrum and it doesn't quite exist, and men can have vaginas and women can have penises until they can't. And so they're creating this like hyper confusing reality in which they simultaneously argue that gender is not based on genitalia, but also we have the entire need to rename and overhaul the entire medical terminology language for naming genitalia in order to try to accommodate for people and make people more comfortable. That's crazy enough in and of itself. Like the idea of doctors calling your penis your outie or your vagina your innie, or trying to change the name of your clitoris to a dicklet. Like that's crazy enough in and of itself, but that's not actually where this presentation stopped. And I think a lot of people on social media have been stopping at the crazy terminology because it's insane and it's clickbait worthy and everybody wants to talk about it. But what's really, really scary were some of the other slides and the other recommendations proposed by Dr. Schrerer at this American Academy of Pediatrics conference that described actual treatment of patients, not just how we address patients, but actual treatment of patients. And that's what I want to share with you guys next because it's truly insane. Presumably, regardless of gender identity, one of the main suggestions made by Dr. Schrerer was menstrual suppression for pediatric patients. In her slides, it says, in menstruating patients, consider hormonal contraception for period cessation. In case you don't really understand what that means or it sounds too clinical medically for you, what this means is if your patient identifying as a male or a female starts getting their period, which is an incredibly normal thing for girls to experience, typically around age 12, 13, when they get their period, one of the clear recommendations recommendations is to immediately put that child on hormonal contraception, aka birth control pills. That's what that means, for specifically the purpose of stopping her period cessation, because we don't know if she wants to identify as a girl forever, or because it's just what we do. We always put girls on birth control pills. It solves everything. It solves their acne. It solves their period cramps. It solves all of the clinical medical problems that they're dealing with. So this is what we have to do for every single one of our patients, and that's what it looks like to provide healthcare. Never mind the fact that cancer rates go up unbelievably dramatically for people who are on birth control pills for a very long period of time. Never mind the fact that it causes all kinds of physical health issues, taking birth control pills for a very long period of time. It may or may not impact fertility, and that's what we are starting to look into now as a society, thank goodness. But we know it impacts your brain function and your entire personality and who you are attracted to and what your sex life looks like and your ability to even have a healthy sex life, or how interested you are in your hobbies or your body's response to stress, therefore leading to all kinds of other mental health problems like anxiety, depression, or more. Immediately, our recommendation from pediatricians is to put your child on birth control to stop their period when it naturally starts happening. Really? And we're calling this gender-affirming care. Interesting. But it didn't stop there. They also recommended non-pharmacologic treatment of body dysphoria. In other words, if your child is experiencing gender dysphoria and your little girl thinks that she might be neither, or she might be a little boy, or your little boy thinks he might be a little girl, or neither, in addition to using hormone therapy and or surgery, which is incredibly controversial with kids, and we all know this, it's talked about all the time, there are non-pharmaceutical options that we might take, or non-surgical options that we might take, that totally have very minor potential side effects. It's certainly not going to impact your child's health long-term, except when it probably will, but it's just minor. It's just minor. For trans boys, aka biological girls, they recommend using binders, which if you've never studied binders, is incredibly physically damaging to girls. It can cause all kinds of physiological issues as you are growing and developing and your bones are growing and developing. These are compression garments that you would wear around your chesticles, I suppose, and wrap really, really, really super tight so that it looks like you do not have any breasts. They say that you should be recommending your child to remove it at night to exercise, remove it when you exercise, and especially if you're coughing due to illness that is brought upon by wearing this. There's only minimal risk associated with binding your breasts, like skin breakdown. Your skin might just melt off of your chest because you are destroying your skin's health. Rib/back pain and deformity. Just a minor side effect of binding your breasts. Spinal and rib deformity. It's minimal. Minimal risk, minimal side effect. Or restricted breathing, because you're going to harm your lungs indefinitely when you do this. But it's minimal. It's a minimal risk. Minimal side effect. Don't worry too much about it. Of course, then they also recommend prosthetic penises for your young child in a pediatric medical setting if your little girl thinks that she might be a little boy. And the flip side, for trans girls, aka little boys who think they might want to be little girls, they recommend tucking, which also, if you've never researched very extensively in the past, can be incredibly damaging to your son or to boys in general. You can buy specialized underwear or use medical tape to do this. Recommendation, don't do it at night because you're not supposed to do it all day, every day, because it's really bad for you. And there's a minimal risk, just a really small one to maybe think about if it wants to be on your radar, of infertility for your son. Just minimal, just something to keep in the back of your mind as a potential problem that might arise from encouraging your son to tuck his penis away because he is confused about his gender identity or being pushed into changing his gender identity by an adult that he is supposed to trust. He might just be infertile, but don't worry too much about that because that's not the most important thing in the entire world. There were countless other slides. Those were by far the worst, but I'll pull up a few more here on this Daily Mail article because I think it's so important for us to be talking about and identifying. beyond the suggestions for pediatricians to practice medicine in that way and change these specific terms and medical terminology in a clinical setting, Dr. Schwerer also recommended changes for how doctors talk to young children and how you talk about gender with their parents at the doctor's office. So how to talk about gender and gender identity, she says, "My name is Dr. Schwerer. I use she, her pronouns. What pronouns do you use?" That should be the first way that you introduce yourself to a child at the doctor's office. Then you're supposed to ask all patients these questions. Every single little boy or girl that comes through your door. Do you think of yourself as male or female, both or neither? In addition to sexual orientation, I talk with my patients about gender identity. Do you know what I mean by that? Some people feel like their physical bodies do not match with the gender they most identify. So you're asking 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, you said all patients. So every single patient that walks through your door. A 2-year-old, do you feel like a girl or a boy? Do you feel like neither? Who are you sexually attracted to? That's completely appropriate for you to be asking children that at the doctor's office. And there's no ulterior motive whatsoever to that happening behind the scenes. And importantly, how you talk about this with parents, especially new parents who have no idea what's going on at the doctor's office and they're just trying to figure this out. I think this is so psychologically manipulative. It is wild to me. They recommend that you talk to the children's parents like this: as your child grows, we'll get to learn more about their gender identity, insinuating that they do not associate, or they might not associate, with the gender that they were born with and the body parts that they were born with. That you tell parents there's no girl or boy toys or colors. It's okay to let your kids pick what they want to play with or what they want to wear. The most important thing is that your child knows they will be loved and accepted by their caregivers, no matter their interests, hobbies, identities, or who they love. All of which sounds really positive on the outset, right? All of that sounds really affirming, really loving, really accepting. It's hard for a parent, especially somebody concerned with the health of their child, because that's why you're at the doctor's office, to disagree with those statements. But as we've seen with all kinds of other crazy psychological indoctrination to adults over the last several years and decade in particular, the repeated mantras of stuff like that absolutely do shape and frame your worldview moving into the future. Even if you are an adult with very strong values, even if you think that you would never be susceptible to something like this, you are susceptible to something like this. And when you have an immediate recommendation to put a child naturally experiencing her first period on birth control, you are setting that child's life and future up for devastating health effects in the future. I say that as someone who took birth control for 9 years, and I was first prescribed at age 15 for acne, like most of the women in my generation. When you create the expectation with a 2 or 3-year-old going to the pediatrician for their annual vaccines or for the flu or for strep throat, which kids get all the time because kids are disgusting and they get sick all the time, when you create this expectation over and over and over again, what gender do you identify as? Because you might not identify as your gender right now. The level of psychological manipulation you are implementing into that child's life blows my mind. It blows my mind. When you suggest to parents that they should consider manipulating the shape and structure of their child's body through artificially taping up or binding up their body parts in order to feel better when they look in the mirror, instead of just, affirming or accepting who they actually are, who they were actually created to be, with the only minimal risks and minimal side effects of permanent rib and spine damage for your kid, of permanent infertility for your kid, that is not health care. That is not treatment for a patient. That is not helping sick people get better. That is not adhering to the Hippocratic oath that you took upon being licensed as a physician to do no harm. It's not. It's destructive. It's harmful to that child and to their family. And it's harmful to society at large. You might be contributing to the end of that person's life. Certainly the end of their physical health. And yet we're applauding this, or at least allowing these presentations to be made at the annual conference for the American Academy of Pediatrics. Are you kidding me? Is this really who we've become as the United States of America? Honestly, Because throughout all of college and all of grad school, I was so excited about going to medical school. And obviously I went in a very different direction in my life, but throughout my entire experience getting my degree in biomedical sciences, I loved science. I loved the pursuit of truth. I loved learning about this stuff to try to help as many people as I possibly could. Are we really okay with our doctors creating health problems instead of solving health problems? Are we really okay with our doctors psychologically manipulating the next generation of kids to create lifelong patients, to create lifelong consumers of the pharmaceutical industry, because that's really what's going on behind the scenes here, instead of adhering to the Hippocratic Oath that they took when they became physicians in the first place? Are we really okay with that? Are we really okay as a society from going from the most medically advanced and innovative country in the world to calling this progress in healthcare? We shouldn't be, even though we are. I don't even know how I can wrap my head around this, and I'm not a parent. I'm getting married in a few months. I hope to have children by the grace of God someday, but I'm not a parent. I can't imagine, chat, you who are parents, how you feel about this. I mean, how does that feel as somebody with young kids, especially, that you can't really trust what's going on when you take your sick child to the pediatrician to get better when they're sick and you need help? How does that feel about where your children might be being psychologically manipulated in other areas of American society, outside of the healthcare industry even? What are we doing is the bigger question that I have, America. Like, sure, we joke all the time about how progress is really regress and we're living in this stupid, regressive, postmodern, woke society. But do you see the tangible, physical devastation that comes about from ideology like this? It's not just silly pronouns in your bio. It's not just getting an A on a paper in college because your non-binary, super modern professor is in charge of your grade and you just want to deal with this. Like, this is a real life, physical alteration of reality for the entire next generation of Americans. This is the erasure of health and of gender as we know it. And gender does matter, by the way, whether we want to admit that or not. It leads to creation of new human beings, which is kind of an important factor in society, if you ask me. America is a joke today. If this is what we are upholding as progress, if this is what we are applauding as healthcare, if this is what we are expecting to be this postmodern utopian future that people like Dr. Schreier are trying to build brick by brick by brick. I don't know what the MO of a doctor like this is to be pushing this ideology. I don't know why Dr. Schreier here has gone out of her way to make this presentation and to double down on it. I'm sure the American Association of Pediatrics isn't going to make a statement about this, despite calls to do so. They can't afford to, because either way, they're going to piss off a whole lot of people. But they shouldn't have had this presentation in the first place. That's the bottom line. They shouldn't have allowed it to happen in the first place. But whatever the MO is, maybe there's a huge payout from a big pharma company, from a pharmaceutical company that's trying to push some of this stuff. Maybe it's for recognition because you knew this would go super viral all over the country. Maybe there's something deeper to that. I know you'll probably never see this, Dr. Schreier, but if you do, I just want to encourage you, wherever you are at politically, wherever you are at religiously, do some soul searching to try to find the innocence and the humanity in the kids that you are treating again. Because they're kids. Their biggest problem should be learning how to zip up their jacket, or learning how to tie their shoe, or having you clean out their scrape that they got on the playground after they fell off the monkey bars. And instead, we are treating these beautiful, innocent children like lab rats, like human experiments to keep up with the constantly changing demands of postmodern woke society, to try to pose ourselves and posture ourselves as these progressive heroes for society. There is nothing heroic about any of that presentation. There is nothing heroic about prescribing birth control to young girls en masse. There's nothing heroic about encouraging young girls and young boys to be chest binding or tucking their penises and causing all kinds of irreversible medical defects by doing so. There is nothing heroic about trying to change the name of a clitoris to a dicklet or a vagina to a front hole. Where are the feminists on that, by the way? Just no input whatsoever. There's nothing heroic about that because you are deliberately trying to confuse a society in order to control them better. I don't know you personally, Dr. Schreier, and on the off chance that you see this, I don't wish any ill will against you necessarily, but that is not healthcare. And I would love to encourage you to go back to the exact words in the Hippocratic Oath that you took on your first day of being a physician. And people wonder, by the way, why Americans are losing faith in the American medical system. People wonder why there's this massive overcorrection to never take your child to the doctor, even though sometimes you kind of do need to. People wonder why there's this crazy 100% holistic health thing going on right now. Sometimes it's very, very true, and sometimes we have modern medicine for a reason, right? I think it's a lot more nuanced than that, but we wonder why that's happening. It's because of crap like this. It's because of the opposite of healthcare that we are applauding as the future of medicine in this country. I wish I could even try to make some of this up. I can't. But it just goes beyond the pale for me. You can't even make it up. You can't. You guys have a lot to say in the chat, so let's hear about it. Sabina says, I'm going to have a niece in a month, and I don't want her to have to go through this. Her parents at least know about this crazy stuff, so I think that she's pretty safe. Alex says, no wonder only 16% of Gen Z is proud to be an American. Kermit sips tea. Yep. You are absolutely not wrong. A bunch of people are saying people who push this type of mentality are trying to, I have to be really careful about how I say this because of certain video platforms. GROOM children. Interestingly, I had never really thought about this from a legal perspective. Most of you guys know when I decided not to go to med school, I applied for law school, and then I obviously ended up not going because I have the career that I do now. But my parents are both attorneys, so we think about stuff from a legal perspective a lot in my household. A bunch of people were saying when you are interviewing a child who has been abused by an adult, particularly sexually abused by an adult, you interview them through a forensic interview, and if they are unable to correctly identify their body parts based on the actual names of their body parts and the structures on their body, then they can't end up prosecuting that person, the perpetrator, for child abuse, which is really crazy. So people will try to GROOM children quite frequently by changing the names, creating like pet names of their body parts in an attempt to try to take advantage of them and try to abuse them, which blows my mind. So I don't know how much this might be playing into something like that, but it is absolutely something worth thinking about. Over Macho says, I don't think this is deliberately trying to confuse people. Most people are just following the ever-evolving group think. Well, as groupthink becomes more and more common and we change the definitions of what is objectively truthful, I anticipate probably a whole lot more of that is going to happen in the future. John Best says, in What is a Woman, great film, by the way, they talk about puberty blockers that chemically castrate the boys that use them, and that's what we are calling healthcare, especially for young kiddos all over the world. Nitty Witty says they're going to try to make androgynous kids in labs and then raise them in no families, but training centers, the community centers. I mean, that sounds so insane, right? That literally sounds like this book, 1984, or it sounds like The Giver, which I also just rewatched the movie for. Great movie, by the way. I had no idea Meryl Streep was in that movie. They did a great job with the movie adaptation. That sounds like so tinfoil hat far-fetched. That would literally never happen in a million years, but that's literally what people are advocating for, and we still laugh about it as if it's a joke. Like, people are actually suggesting we gestate babies in pods in laboratories, or that we grow stem cells in laboratories, or that we can edit the baby's genome after it's conceived in a laboratory so that we can root out any sort of disability or whatever. People like Sophie Lewis, a feminist author from the UK, write books, manifestos called Abolish the Nuclear Family. BLM is pushing to abolish the nuclear family and then quietly removing that off of their website because they don't really want to admit that part out loud. But nitty witty, you say that as this like crazy hyperbolic thing, but that's kind of what's happening like in real time. They are advocating for a completely androgynous population. They want babies to be grown in labs and in pods rather than in wombs, or maybe in wombs implanted in men rather than women growing babies, which is incredibly ridiculous and super, super crazy and scary. But like that doesn't seem like that far off to me, to be totally honest. Total Package says a great quote from this book: "Truth is the new hate speech." You are not wrong. You're not wrong. Vinny says, if I hear anyone say the word chesticle in a non-negative light, I'm going to rebuke them in the name of Jesus. My brothers and sisters in Christ, your breasts are not chesticles. Like, genuinely, this sounds like a joke from a 1980s sitcom. Am I watching Seinfeld? No. Is Chandler Bing telling me this joke? Rest in peace, Matt Perry. No. These are breasts, not chesticles. I don't know who needs to hear that today, but like, please, for the love of God, do not buy into that insanity that is happening right before our very eyes. Craven says on Rumble, we are going backwards from reality to fantasy, which is exactly on the money. Like, we are in this post-truth, post-modern, post-reality society that feels more and more like the Stranger Things upside down every single day. I say that all the time in speeches, and I wrote about that in my book, which you guys can pre-order, by the way. It's hiding behind me in a couple places. But that's exactly what's happening. Like, we are in this weird upside down reality where things kind of look familiar, things kind of seem familiar, like it seems like it should be the reality that we've lived in for decades and decades and decades. But with every passing day, it's just incredibly obvious to me that we are on the other side of that. We are looking into reality through this distorted lens of lies, where lies have become truth and truth have become lies. And it blows my mind how more people don't see that with every passing day. Amy says, I'm just waiting for the life expectancy of people to drop significantly. 80 will be the new 100. I sure hope not, because my personal goal is to live to 103. That is my personal goal. I would love to see something like that happen, but you never know. We'll see. Life is short and it's a gift. We were going to talk about this Washington Post article of 41 states suing Meta at the end of the stream today. I think we're going to hold that over for tomorrow because I would rather leave you guys with some words of encouragement and hope after the end of that incredibly dystopian story that I just told you. So we'll talk about the Meta lawsuit tomorrow on the stream. And before we jump over to our locals post-stream Q&A, which you guys are all invited to, I'm going to drop the link in our chat right now. I want to leave you with something to feel hopeful about at the end of this stream because I know that was a lot of incredible weird negativity for us to unpack. Over the weekend, I participated in, it was mandatory, but we were pretty excited about going, in a marriage retreat through our local church here in Miami with my fiance. When you get married in the Catholic Church, I've talked about this a bit on the stream and a lot more in my other content on locals, but there's all kinds of stuff that you have to do that's mandatory for you to do before your wedding day, which I actually really appreciate because it helps you treat the sacrament of matrimony very, very seriously in a world that is totally degrading the value of marriage and says that it's just a piece of paper that you can rip up. But one of the things that you have to do before you get married in the Catholic Church is attend a weekend retreat with your fiance and other soon-to-be married couples from your area, from your archdiocese, and learn about the context of marriage and the sacrament of matrimony from a religious perspective rather than just a secular legal perspective. And you talk about all kinds of stuff. If you guys are going to get married in the future, you'll deal with all of this if you are Catholic, but you talk about marital sexuality, natural family planning. You talk about the sacrament of the Eucharist and Mass and why attending church regularly totally impacts divorce rates. Like, actually, really interesting fact. If you and your spouse pray together every single day and you attend Mass at least once a week, or you attend church together at least once a week, you have less than a 1% rate of ever getting divorced, less than a 1% chance of ever getting divorced, which is mind-blowing in our society where we have almost a 50% divorce rate. We have all kinds of stuff. But we talked about all kinds of stuff over the last few days, and it was just really, really encouraging and cool because we live in this society where it seems like morality is one foot out the door, and it seems like truth is one foot out the door, and that there's nobody else like us, like this community watching this stream right now, that is at all seeking truth, that is at all aware of good and bad, that is at all seeking to bring light into the darkness of our very, very crazy world. But that could not be further from reality. Sometimes it feels like we live on this island and that there's nobody who thinks like us and nobody who shares our values. But I am seeing this revival and this hunger for purpose, this thirst for knowledge, and this adherence to tradition and passion for tradition and traditional values that I have never expected to the level that we see in our generation in the last several months than like anything I've ever seen in my life. And it is so very cool because I think in our very broken world, in our world that degrades the value of truth, in our world that tries to confuse people and control people and destroy people with every passing day, there are more and more and more young people in this country and around the world waking up and realizing life is not supposed to be like this. This is not what this is supposed to be like, and we can make something better if we look through our history, if we find our traditions, and we try to bring those things into the future. So some of you guys might know my fiance is in RCIA, so he's in the process of joining the Catholic Church right now. And there are like 42 students in his class, which is the highest that they've ever had. It's actually a record high across the entire area of Miami for people who are joining the Catholic Church. And I'm seeing that in other denominations of Christianity as well. And at our marriage retreat last weekend, in a society where supposedly we have the lowest marriage rate of all time, ever since we began recording rates in America in 1867, and one of the highest divorce rates of all time, there were 52 young Catholic couples for all day Saturday and all day Sunday learning about the importance of their faith, sharing that importance of their faith with their fiance, learning about why marriage is a religious thing that we should be celebrating and is so beautiful, and the difference between matrimony and a legal civil union and why that differentiation and distinction matters, and who are excited about sharing that with the world. People who have incredible values, people who are asking all the right questions, and people who are looking around at our very broken world and trying to do something about it, trying to change it, and trying to make this world a little bit more like the next one. And I just want to tell you that I'm seeing that everywhere. There were a lot of healthcare practitioners, for example, in our class over the weekend, in our retreat over the weekend, and in this RCIA class that my fiance is participating in. For every crazy, insane person that tries to make all the suggestions and the changes that we talked about today, there are incredible good people, people rooted in truth, people willing to speak up and who are courageous about doing so, and people who are trying to fix some of this brokenness that we see in our society every day. So have hope. You are not alone. It can so easily feel, especially when many of us work from home or we work remote or we're in school and we're just constantly surrounded by people who are different from us or attack our values, like you live on this island or you are this insane minority that doesn't have anybody else to cling to with a community in this crazy upside down world. You can and you should, and there are other people out there like you everywhere. You just sometimes have to be willing to go to the right place to see it. And I feel so refreshed and so inspired by seeing so many other couples doing the exact same journey that my fiance and I are going through right now. It can feel really daunting to try to live this countercultural lifestyle of getting married and falling in love and having a ton of kids and not telling them that their gender is a mistake at this doctor that we talked about today. Believing in objective truth, having faith in our very, very seemingly godless society. But it's possible, and there are other people doing that every single day. And I hope and pray that you guys find some hope in that process as well. Rumble Rick, good to see you. Glad you're here. All right, you guys, that was a lot to unpack today. We're going to save the 41 states suing Meta story for tomorrow on the stream. I told you I had some fun announcements on the other end of the stream, so that's very exciting. I would love to have any of your guys' inputs or recommendations before we jump over to locals for guests or interviews that you might want to see on the stream as we close out the rest of 2023. It's wild to me that we are already moving at the speed of light. It's November on Wednesday, PSA, towards the end of the year. So if you have literally anybody that you would like to see on the stream, drop it in the chat really, really quick. I also did a question box on my Instagram about this and got some really, really great suggestions and recommendations. So drop it in the chat if you guys want to see anybody in particular. We are going to have a very special guest on Wednesday for our stream, so stay tuned for that. And I have a really exciting event that I'm going to on Wednesday, a special screening of Dinesh D'Souza's movie Police State. We played an interview of our conversation with Dinesh a little over a week ago for the premiere of his movie, and would love for you guys to check it out. It is called Police State. Those of you watching on Rumble and Locals, you guys can buy access to it through basically pay-per-view. It's called Content Plus over there. Could not recommend it more myself. And what else? I feel like there was another announcement, but now I can't remember. I had kind of a weird day today. My internet was out for forever. My car battery was dead. It was just kind of a weird day. So it's all escaping me and going out my brain into the other ethos of beyond my brain right now. But I hope you guys enjoyed today's stream. Before you go, do me a huge favor, hit that like button. It could look like a little thumbs up or a little heart. Make sure that you are following or subscribing to this channel so that you always know when we are going live or uploading a new video. And you are all invited to join us over on Locals for our post-stream Q&A. I dropped that link in our live chat, and we would love to see you over there. We have some very special Locals only content coming to you guys this week, and we would love to have you guys see it as well. YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, and Getter. We'll see you tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern. Locals, don't go anywhere. We will be right back.